Mara stood at the edge of her sanctuary as the twin moons rose above the crystalline peaks of Aelthon. She was an ancient elf woman with skin that held the luminescence of pearls and hair that flowed like molten silver down her slender frame. Her eyes were violet and held the depth of 3,000 years of memories, yet they sparkled with an endless curiosity about the vast universe beyond her world. The evening wind carried the scent of blooming starflowers and something else, something strange and unfamiliar. Mara tilted her head and listened to the frequencies that most beings could not hear. Something was wrong in the sky above her territory. Mara lived differently from her people. While other elves preferred to remain hidden in their ancient underground cities and sacred forests, she had chosen to build her home in the wilderness, where civilization ended and true nature began. Here, in this remote sanctuary surrounded by mountains that touched the clouds, she had dedicated her entire existence to caring for the magnificent creatures that others had forgotten. The dragons were her life, her purpose, and her greatest joy. Zephyr was the eldest of her dragons and had been with her for nearly 700 years. He was enormous, with scales that shifted through every color imaginable like a living rainbow reflecting through crystal. His eyes were wise and ancient, holding knowledge from ages long past. His wings could stretch across an entire valley, and when he flew, the very air seemed to sing with his passage. Ember was the middle dragon, smaller but possessing a fierce spirit that burned as bright as the flames that danced across her crimson scales. She had a sharp intelligence and could solve problems that would baffle most scholars. Storm was the youngest, barely 5 years old by dragon standards, with scales the color of deep ocean blue and eyes that flickered like lightning during a storm. Mara had found Storm as an abandoned egg, floating in the debris field of a destroyed asteroid, and she had loved the creature from the moment it hatched. These 3 dragons were everything to Mara. They were her family, her companions, and her reason for existing in this isolated place. The humans had no understanding of dragons anymore. In their ancient histories, they spoke of dragons as monsters and demons, but Mara knew the truth. Dragons were beings of incredible intelligence, profound emotion, and remarkable compassion. They were capable of love that could reshape worlds and loyalty that transcended time itself. Mara walked out to the great stone platform where she often sat with her dragons during the evening hours. The platform overlooked a vast valley, and from here she could see for hundreds of miles across the landscape. Zephyr emerged from his resting cave, his massive form casting shadows across the ground. He approached his beloved companion and lowered his enormous head so that she could reach up and touch the smooth scales between his eyes. This was their ritual, their way of greeting each other at the end of each day. Suddenly, Mara felt it through the bond she shared with Zephyr. There was danger approaching from the sky. A human ship was falling, burning through the atmosphere of Aelthon with engines that were failing. Both Mara and Zephyr could feel the chaos aboard the vessel, the fear and desperation of the humans inside. Ember and Storm rushed out to join them, their senses also picking up the distress in the upper atmosphere. Mara made a decision in that moment that would change everything. She could ignore the approaching ship and let the humans handle their own crisis. The ancient laws of her people forbade interfering in human affairs, and there were good reasons for this isolation. Humans were unpredictable and their technology was dangerous, but Mara had never been good at following rules, and something in her spirit could not ignore suffering. She spoke to her dragons in the ancient way, using a combination of sounds and emotions that traveled through the bond they all shared. She told them that she was going to try to help, that they must stay here and wait for her return. Zephyr rumbled in protest, but he understood her heart. Mara moved quickly toward the direction where she sensed the human ship would crash. She ran across the crystalline plains with speed that no normal being could match, her elf body moving with grace and power born from centuries of practice. The ship came down in a massive explosion of metal and fire in the neutral zone, that dangerous area where the territories of her people and the Human Federation met. Mara arrived just as the wreckage settled and emergency lights flickered among the twisted metal and burning components. Smoke filled the air thick and choking. She moved through the debris without hesitation, using her superior senses to locate survivors. Most of the crew had not survived the impact. The human ship was too damaged, the fall too severe. But Mara found one survivor, a male human who was trapped beneath a fallen beam. He was conscious and terrified, his eyes wide with pain and fear. Mara spoke to him in the human language that she had learned over the centuries through observation and study. She told him to remain calm, that she was going to help him. The human stared at her in complete shock. He had never seen anything like her before. Her beauty was almost impossible for his mind to process, and the fact that she was speaking his language made everything even more confusing. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a broken whisper. Mara lifted the heavy beam with surprising ease, her elven strength far exceeding that of human males. The human crawled out from beneath the metal and collapsed on the ground, breathing heavily. Mara helped him to his feet and supported his weight as they moved away from the burning wreckage. The human tried to ask her questions, but Mara gestured for silence. They needed to move away from this place before more of the ship's systems exploded. She led him across the plateau toward her sanctuary, moving carefully to account for his injuries and human fragility. The human's name was Lucas. She learned this when he finally managed to speak clearly as they walked through the night. He was the captain of a merchant vessel that had been caught in an unexpected asteroid field. His ship had been struck by debris, and all the main systems had failed. He had tried to land safely, but there was nothing he could do. Everyone on his crew was gone, lost in the crash. Lucas spoke these words with deep sorrow in his voice, and Mara felt genuine compassion for his pain. She told him that she was sorry for his loss, that death was a burden that all living beings had to bear. She told him that his crew had died with honor, that in his world this would be recorded in their history. Lucas looked at her with confusion and asked who she was and where he was. Mara answered that her name was Mara, that she was an elf, and that he was now in the sanctuary of Aelthon. When they finally reached her home made of living vines and soft glowing crystals, Lucas could barely stand. Mara brought him inside and laid him down on soft bedding that was filled with herbs that promoted healing. She used her knowledge of ancient medicine to tend to his wounds. She cleaned the cuts and bruises, applied salves made from rare plants, and wrapped his injuries with cloth that felt like silk. Lucas watched her work with wonder and gratitude, unable to believe that any of this was real. Mara gave him water to drink that tasted cool and refreshing, containing minerals that would help restore his strength. She offered him food, simple fare made from the vegetables and fruits that grew in her gardens. Lucas ate slowly, his body weak from the trauma and his mind struggling to understand what was happening. As darkness fell completely and the stars emerged in the purple sky above, Lucas finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he first saw her. He asked if she was going to help him get back to his people. He explained that there was a human colony not far from here, that they had technology that could send messages to his company. He said that his people would reward her generously for saving his life. Mara listened to his words and considered her response carefully. She told him that she would help him, but first he needed to rest and heal. She said that they could discuss what came next when he was stronger. That night, as Lucas slept on the soft bedding in Mara's home, she walked outside to meet her dragons. She told them what had happened, and they listened with complete understanding. Zephyr seemed troubled by the presence of a human so close to their sanctuary, but he trusted Mara's judgment completely. Mara stood between her beloved dragons and looked up at the stars, wondering what fate had brought this human to her door, and what would come from this encounter that had changed everything. Lucas woke to sunlight streaming through walls that seemed to be made of living crystal. For a moment, he could not remember where he was or how he had arrived there. Then the memories came crashing back like a wave. The asteroid field, the failing ship, the explosion, and then her. The beautiful woman with silver hair and violet eyes who had saved his life. He tried to sit up and pain shot through his body. His left arm was wrapped in cloth, his ribs were tender, and his legs felt weak. But the pain was manageable. Better than it should have been after such a devastating crash. He looked around the room and saw that it was unlike anything in human civilization. The walls glowed with soft green light that came from within the stone itself. The furniture seemed to be grown rather than built, shaped from wood that had been encouraged to form chairs and tables through some kind of ancient technique. Everything was beautiful and organic and completely foreign to his human experience. Mara appeared in the doorway holding a tray with food and drink. She wore different clothing than she had worn the night before, a flowing garment made from material that seemed to shift between silver and blue. She smiled at him, and Lucas felt something in his chest tighten. He had met many beautiful women in his life, but there was something about Mara that transcended mere physical beauty. There was a quality in her presence that made everything around her seem more real and more important. She asked him how he felt, if the pain was manageable, if he needed anything else. Lucas thanked her and tried to ask her questions about where he was and how he had gotten here. But Mara held up a hand gently and told him to rest first. She said that he had been through terrible trauma and that his body needed time to heal. She told him that they could talk later when he was stronger and more ready to understand what had happened. Mara helped him eat the food, which tasted strange but wonderful. There was fruit that he had never encountered before, sweet and juicy with a flavor that seemed to dance on his tongue. There was bread that was warm and filled with nuts and seeds. There was a vegetable preparation that tasted somehow both familiar and completely foreign. As Lucas ate, Mara sat nearby and watched him with an expression of gentle concern. She asked questions about human food and culture and the way humans lived in their vast cities among the stars. Over the next several days, Lucas began to recover. His wounds healed with remarkable speed, faster than should have been possible. He realized that the salves and medicines that Mara had applied to his injuries were far more advanced than any human medical technology. Mara explained that elven medicine worked differently than human medicine. It worked with the body's natural healing processes rather than against them, encouraging the body to repair itself more efficiently. As Lucas grew stronger, he spent more time exploring the sanctuary. Mara showed him around, pointing out the different plants in her gardens, explaining which ones had medicinal properties and which ones were purely for food. She showed him a pool of water that was fed by an underground spring, water that stayed perfectly warm all year round. She showed him a library carved into the stone of the mountain, filled with books written in the Elven language and other languages that Lucas could not read. But the most remarkable discovery was when Mara formally introduced him to her dragons. She led him out to the great stone platform where Lucas had first arrived, and there he saw them in full daylight for the first time. His breath caught in his throat. He had thought he understood what dragons looked like from human legends and ancient drawings, but reality was far more magnificent than anything his mind had imagined. Zephyr approached first, his enormous form casting a shadow that darkened the entire platform. The dragon's scales caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 colors. His eyes were gentle but powerful, and when he looked at Lucas, the human felt as though he was being evaluated by something far beyond human understanding. Mara placed her hand on Lucas's shoulder and told him not to be afraid. She said that Zephyr was curious about him, and that the dragon meant no harm. Mara explained that dragons were intelligent beings, that they could feel emotions and think complex thoughts. She told Lucas that Zephyr had been with her for 700 years, and that the dragon was one of the oldest living beings on the planet. She said that Ember and Storm were also intelligent and that they each had their own personalities and preferences. Lucas listened to her words and found them hard to believe, but standing in front of Zephyr, he could sense the truth of what she was saying. Ember approached next, her crimson scales burning like living fire in the sunlight. She was smaller than Zephyr, but no less impressive. She circled Lucas with what appeared to be curiosity, and Lucas could have sworn that she was studying him, trying to figure out what this fragile human creature was. Storm, the youngest dragon, was more playful. The blue dragon approached Lucas and lowered her head, her lightning eyes flickering with what might have been amusement. Mara taught Lucas about the dragons over the following weeks. She showed him how she communicated with them using a combination of sounds and emotions, transmitted through some kind of bond that Lucas could not fully understand. She showed him how to approach them safely, how to read their body language, and how to understand what they were feeling. She demonstrated how Zephyr could speak using low rumbling words that vibrated through the earth. She showed how Ember could paint pictures with fire, creating images in the smoke that told stories of hunts and adventures from her long life. She showed how Storm could sing, a sound so beautiful that it made Lucas want to cry. As weeks turned into months, Lucas began to feel less like a guest and more like part of Mara's world. He learned to help her tend to the gardens and care for the dragons. He learned some words of the Elven language, though Mara said his pronunciation was terrible and probably always would be. She laughed when he tried, not in mockery but with genuine affection for his efforts. But more importantly, Lucas found himself developing feelings for Mara that went far beyond gratitude. He had never known anyone like her. She was intelligent and kind, and possessed a depth of understanding about the universe that made human philosophers seem shallow and limited. She had saved his life, and every day that he spent with her, He found new reasons to be grateful for her presence. Mara, for her part, seemed to enjoy his company. She spent hours talking to him about human history and human art and human music. She was fascinated by the way humans lived such short lives and yet managed to accomplish so much and care so deeply. She told him that from her perspective of thousands of years, humans seemed like brilliant flames that burned bright and fast, and then were extinguished. She said that this intensity was something that elves often lacked, and she found it beautiful and tragic at the same time. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red, Lucas realized that he had fallen completely in love with this impossible woman. He knew that it was foolish. He knew that she was a different species, that she would likely outlive him by thousands of years, that their worlds were meant to remain separate. But love rarely cares about such logical considerations. Mara seemed to sense his deepening feelings. She looked at him with an expression that was unreadable and told him that she needed to show him something important. She said that there were things about her and her world that he needed to understand before they could continue as they had been. She told him that tomorrow they would go on a journey into the deep places of Aelthon, places where her people rarely ventured and where humans had never set foot. She said that what he would see there would change his understanding of everything. That night, Lucas lay awake wondering what Mara was going to show him and what secrets of her world he was about to discover. He knew only that his life had changed completely from the moment his ship crashed on this world. Everything that came next would be different from anything he had ever imagined. The morning arrived with mist hanging low over the valleys, and crystalline peaks of Aelthon emerging from the fog like islands rising from a sea. Mara woke Lucas before dawn and told him to dress warmly. She gave him garments made from material that seemed to keep heat close to the body, while remaining lightweight and comfortable. She gave him sturdy boots designed for traveling across rough terrain. When Lucas asked where they were going, Mara simply said that he would understand when they arrived. They left the sanctuary with only Zephyr accompanying them. Ember and Storm remained behind to rest and protect the home that Mara had built over centuries. Zephyr flew ahead of them, his massive wings beating slowly as he soared through the morning air. Mara led Lucas down paths that seemed to wind deeper and deeper into the mountains. They passed through valleys that grew progressively more remote and untouched by civilization. As they traveled, Mara told Lucas about the history of her world. She spoke of times when dragons roamed freely across all the lands, when humans and elves had different relationships than they did now. She spoke of wars and conflicts that had lasted centuries, of peace treaties that had been broken, of a slow drawing apart until the two species avoided each other completely. She told him that most humans feared dragons and most dragons distrusted humans, and this mutual fear had kept them separated for thousands of years. She told him about her decision to live as she did, caring for the dragons, maintaining the ancient bonds between species. She said that her people thought she was wasting her time, that humans could never change and that dragons would always be seen as monsters in human society. Her family had wanted her to return to the underground cities and live a proper elven life, finding an elven mate and raising elven children. But Mara had refused. She said that she had always been different, that she could never accept the limitations that her culture tried to place on her. As they continued deeper into the mountains, the landscape began to change. They came to places where the very rocks seemed to hum with ancient power. The air felt different here, thicker somehow, as though it contained something that normal air did not possess. Lucas began to feel strange sensations, as though his mind was touching something vast and ancient and incomprehensibly old. Mara led him to a great cavern entrance that opened into the mountainside. The entrance was enormous, large enough for Zephyr to walk through without lowering his head. At the threshold of this cavern, Mara stopped and turned to Lucas. She told him that what he was about to see was known to very few humans, that most of her people preferred to keep these places hidden and secret. She asked if he was truly ready to see the heart of Aelthon, the source of the power that had sustained their world for countless millennia. Lucas said that he was ready. Though his voice trembled slightly with uncertainty, he trusted Mara, but he was also afraid of what lay ahead. They entered the cavern together with Zephyr right beside them. As they walked deeper into the mountain, the walls began to glow with soft blue light. Lucas realized that he was seeing bioluminescent organisms covering the walls, tiny creatures that produced light naturally. As he looked more closely, he saw that the light was not random but formed patterns. beautiful and intricate designs that seemed to tell stories. The cavern opened into a vast underground chamber that took Lucas's breath away. The chamber was so large that he could not see the far wall in the darkness above. The floor of the chamber was covered with water so clear that it seemed like glass. Reflected in this water were stars, actual stars that seemed to be held somehow within the depths of the underground lake. Lucas stood at the edge of this impossible sight and felt his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. Mara led him to the water's edge and told him that this was one of the ancient places of power, created long ago by forces that even she did not fully understand. She said that the water held memories, that if he touched it he might be able to sense some of those memories. She said that the dragons were creatures of ancient magic, and that they were connected to places like this through bonds that transcended normal understanding. Lucas knelt down and extended his hand toward the water. As his fingers touched the cool surface, he felt a rush of sensation that overwhelmed his senses. He saw images, fragments of visions that came and went too quickly to fully comprehend. He saw dragons flying through skies that burned with colors that did not exist in normal reality. He saw elves working together with dragons to build great cities of crystalline light. He saw conflicts and battles and the slow separation of species. He saw Mara, much younger than she was now, singing to Zephyr and forming some kind of bond that was deeper than love, deeper than friendship. When Lucas pulled his hand back from the water, he was gasping for breath. Tears streamed down his face, though he could not explain why. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder and told him that he had seen the truth of their world, that what he had witnessed was real and had happened in the time before humans and elves had forgotten how to walk together. She told him that Zephyr was not just her companion, but her bound partner, that they shared a connection that was far deeper than anything that could exist between two humans. She said that the dragons had offered to share this bond with her centuries ago, and she had accepted it willingly. She said that through this bond, she could feel what the dragons felt, think what they thought, and share in their vast and ancient wisdom. Mara told Lucas that she had brought him here because she wanted him to understand the truth about her, and about what she had been offering him through her friendship. She said that the isolation she had chosen was not just about protecting the dragons or maintaining traditions. It was about her choice to remain connected to an older world, to keep alive the possibility that humans and non-humans could exist together in harmony and mutual respect. She told him that his arrival had changed something within her, that she had begun to wonder if the isolation could end. She said that she had brought him here to ask him a question that had no simple answer. She asked if he could accept her completely, understanding that she was bound to ancient magic and ancient beings in ways that he might never fully comprehend. She asked if he could love her not despite these things, but because of them. Lucas listened to her words and looked into her violet eyes and realized that this was the moment that would define the rest of his life. He understood that Mara was giving him a choice. He could tell her that this was too much, that the gap between their kinds was too great, and he could ask her to help him return to human civilization. Or he could accept her completely and embrace a future that he could not predict or control. He thought about the brief time he had spent with her, about how she had changed his understanding of what was possible. He thought about the dragons and their beauty, and their ancient intelligence. He thought about a universe where humans did not have to fear difference but could celebrate and embrace it. He reached out and took Mara's hand and told her that he did not need to understand everything about her, to know that he wanted to spend his life with her. Mara's expression did not change, but Lucas felt Zephyr shift beside them, the great dragon's movement suggesting satisfaction or approval. Mara told Lucas that she was glad to hear him say that, because what came next would require him to trust her completely. She said that there was still so much for him to see and learn, and that the journey they were beginning together would take them to places that neither of them had ever imagined. They returned to the sanctuary as night began to fall, painting the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. The moons of Elthon rose slowly above the horizon, casting their gentle light across the crystalline landscape. Ember and Storm greeted them upon their return, and Lucas realized that both dragons immediately sensed something different about him. They approached him with less caution than they had shown before, as though they understood that he was no longer a stranger to their world, but had been accepted into something deeper and more meaningful. Mara prepared a special meal for the evening, food that she explained had been preserved from previous harvests and was reserved for occasions of great importance. They sat together on the platform overlooking the valley with all three dragons resting nearby. Storm had placed herself close to Lucas, her blue scales shimmering in the moonlight. The young dragon seemed to have decided that Lucas was now a permanent part of her family. As the night deepened and the stars began to emerge, Lucas found himself thinking about what he wanted from his future. He had been a successful merchant captain, commanding a vessel through the stars, trading goods and knowledge between human colonies. But standing here with Mara and her dragons, he realized that everything he had done before felt hollow and meaningless compared to what he was experiencing now. He thought about human culture and how his people usually approached relationships. He knew that he should probably ask Mara's family for permission to court her properly, but he had no access to her family, and likely would not be accepted by them anyway. He thought about the human customs of engagement and marriage, and he wondered if such things even made sense in a relationship between a human and an elf. As these thoughts tumbled through his mind, Lucas made a decision that seemed perfectly logical and right to him in that moment. He looked at Mara and told her that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, that nothing else mattered compared to the possibility of being near her. He spoke the words with passion and sincerity, pouring all of his genuine emotion into his declaration. He told her that he would give up everything, his ship, his position, his connection to human civilization, if it meant he could stay with her. Mara's expression changed in a way that Lucas had never seen before. Her violet eyes widened and her hand moved to her heart. She looked at Zephyr, then at Ember, and finally at Storm. All three dragons suddenly became very alert, their focus entirely on Lucas and Mara. Zephyr raised his massive head and rumbled a sound so deep that it seemed to resonate through the very ground beneath them. Mara stood up slowly, her movements graceful but filled with something that Lucas could not quite identify. She told him that he did not understand what he was saying, that his words carried weight and meaning in her culture that they did not carry in human culture. She said that by speaking his commitment under the light of both moons and in the presence of dragons, he had just made a binding declaration according to ancient elven law. Lucas felt confusion wash over him. He had only been trying to express his feelings, to tell her that he cared about her deeply. He had not intended to do anything formal or binding. He tried to explain this to Mara, but she held up a hand and told him to listen to her carefully. She explained that in elven tradition, when two beings declared themselves willing to walk the same path together, speaking those words with genuine emotion under the witness of the moons and dragons, the declaration was considered binding and eternal. She said that in elven culture, such declarations were rare and treated with utmost seriousness. She said that most elves would spend centuries knowing a potential partner before making such a statement, carefully weighing all of the consequences and implications. Lucas felt his heart begin to race. He asked Mara if she was telling him that he was now married to her, or engaged or something like that. He said that he did not understand the exact nature of what he had just done. Mara smiled at him, a smile that contained sadness and joy and something else that he could not identify. She told him that the answer was more complex than simple human categories could express. She said that what he had just done was make a declaration of eternal companionship, a commitment to walk together through whatever the future held. She said that in elven law and custom, this was considered binding and permanent. She said that if he truly meant what he said, then from this moment forward, they were bound together in a way that transcended normal relationship categories. Lucas asked her if she was angry with him for making such a declaration without fully understanding it. He said that he had only meant to express his feelings and his desire to be with her. Mara told him that she was not angry, but rather moved by the depth of his emotion and the sincerity of his commitment. She said that he had just declared in front of her three dragons and under the witness of the stars that he wanted to be with her forever. She told him that she accepted his declaration, if he truly meant it. She asked him one more time if he understood what he was committing to. She said that this would bind them together, that they would become companions for life, that separation would bring pain to both of them. She said that if he had any doubts at all, he should speak now. Lucas looked into her eyes and saw that she was asking him a genuine question, that she truly wanted to know if he was certain. He thought about everything he had experienced since his ship crashed on this world. He thought about the fear and wonder and beauty of meeting her and her dragons. He thought about the growing feelings that had developed in his heart over the months they had spent together. He thought about the future stretching before him in this alien world where he had found something more real and true than anything he had ever known before. He reached out and took both of her hands and told her that he meant every word. He said that he wanted to be bound to her, that he wanted to walk whatever path they were going to walk together. He said that he did not care that she was an elf, or that she had lived thousands of years, or that she had dragons as companions. He said that she was the only person he had ever truly wanted to be with. When he finished speaking, Zephyr released a sound that seemed to fill the entire sky, a rumbling song that expressed something beyond words. Ember released a burst of flame that painted the darkness with brilliant light. Storm sang her beautiful song, the sound of bells and wind chimes that made everything feel right and true. Mara pulled Lucas close and kissed him, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the universe. The barriers between human and elf, between two completely different species and worlds, seemed to dissolve. Lucas realized that he had just made a commitment that would reshape his entire existence, but he had never been more certain of anything in his life. When they finally pulled apart, Mara told him that they now had to make a decision about what came next. She said that they could not remain hidden in her sanctuary forever, that the wider world would eventually discover their bond. She said that they would have to face her people and his people, and figure out how to exist together in a universe that was not prepared for what they had just created. But for now, she told him, they could simply be together under the stars and under the watchful eyes of the ancient dragons. For now, they could simply exist in this perfect moment where two impossible beings had found each other and decided that their bond was worth whatever consequences might follow. 3 weeks after Lucas's binding declaration to Mara, the sanctuary fell silent as if the entire world was holding its breath. Lucas had been working with Zephyr to repair the communication system salvaged from his crashed ship. Mara had suggested that they needed to contact the outside world and inform both human and elven leadership about what had happened. They could not hide forever, she had explained, and it was better to present their union to their people on their own terms, rather than have it discovered by accident. The repairs took longer than Lucas had anticipated. Much of the technology had been damaged in the crash, and adapting it to work with the power systems available on Elthon proved challenging. But slowly, piece by piece, the communication array began to function again. By the time it was fully operational, Lucas and Mara had already spent many nights discussing what they would say and how their people would likely react. Mara was concerned about her family and her government. She knew that most elves would view her relationship with Lucas as a betrayal of her people and a breaking of ancient laws that kept the species separate. She said that her parents would likely attempt to have the binding declaration dissolved, though she was not sure if such a thing was even possible once the commitment had been made under the witness of dragons and moons. Lucas was equally concerned about human reaction. He told Mara that many humans feared anything they did not understand, and an alliance between a human and an elf would certainly be frightening to those raised on old stories of conflict and danger. He said that some human governments might even see such a relationship as a threat to human security and purity. But despite these concerns, both of them agreed that they could not hide what had happened. Their bond was too real and too strong to deny. So Lucas sat at the communication array and composed a message to Human Federation authorities. In the message, he explained that he had survived the crash of his merchant vessel on Elthon. He explained that he had been saved by a member of the elven species, and that over the course of his time on the planet, he had formed a binding relationship with this elf according to her cultural traditions. He explained that he was now committed to serving as a bridge between human and elven civilizations. He said that he had learned that there was far more commonality between the species than conflict, and that peaceful coexistence was possible. He asked for the Human Federation to recognize his relationship with Mara and to support his efforts to foster diplomatic relationships with the elven leadership. Mara then recorded her own message in the ancient elven language. She explained to her people what had happened and why she had made the binding declaration with a human. She spoke of the ancient bonds between humans and elves and dragons that had existed long ago. She called for her people to remember that isolation had not brought happiness but only stagnation and loss. She declared that she was choosing to build a bridge between their kind, and that she did this not in rebellion, but in hope for a future where her people could once again engage with other species as they had in ages past, when Both messages had been recorded and transmitted. Through the communication array, Lucas and Mara sat together and waited. For the first several hours there was silence. Then slowly responses began to arrive. The Human Federation sent an official inquiry asking for proof that Lucas was truly a human captain and asking for more detailed information about his claims. But the response from the Elven authorities was swift and unmistakably angry. A message arrived marked with the highest authority seals, stating that Mara's actions were illegal and that she was being ordered to return to the underground cities for immediate trial. The message stated that she had violated sacred laws protecting the separation of species and that her so-called binding declaration was a perversion of a sacred tradition that was meant only to unite two elves of compatible bloodlines. Mara listened to the message without showing any emotion, though Lucas could sense the pain that it caused her. She told him that she had known this was likely, that her people would not accept their relationship easily. She told him that she would not return to face trial, that she would not submit to their judgment. She said that she was choosing to live her life as she saw fit, and if that meant being cast out from her people, then so be it. Over the next few weeks, more messages began to arrive. Some were from humans expressing fear and concern about an alliance with an unknown alien species, but some were also from humans expressing fascination and hope about the possibility of peaceful contact with a sentient non-human species. Scientists wanted to conduct studies. Philosophers wanted to discuss the implications of cross-species relationships. Artists wanted to paint and sculpt representations of the dragons. Then one day a message arrived from a human council member named Patricia, who worked in diplomatic relations. She asked for a formal meeting with both Lucas and Mara to discuss the possibility of creating an official peace accord between Human Federation and Elven leadership. She said that what Lucas and Mara had created, despite all of its complications and all of the resistance they were facing, represented something that the universe desperately needed. She said that if they could make their relationship work, it might inspire others to believe that such bridging was possible. Lucas and Mara discussed the offer carefully. They knew that accepting it would mean leaving the sanctuary and traveling to human space stations and human colonies. They knew that they would face suspicion and hostility from some quarters. They knew that their relationship would become a matter of public record and subject to scrutiny and judgment from people who did not understand or approve of what they were doing. But they also knew that this was their chance to change something fundamental about how the universe worked. For thousands of years, humans and elves had kept themselves separate. For thousands of years, fear and misunderstanding had kept the species from discovering what they might accomplish if they worked together. Lucas and Mara had been brought together by chance or fate or random accident, and now they had the opportunity to transform that personal connection into something that could benefit all of their peoples. Mara told the dragons that they would be traveling soon, and she asked them if they were willing to come with her and Lucas to human territories. All three dragons responded with enthusiasm. Zephyr rumbled approval. Ember released flame. Storm sang her beautiful song. The dragons understood that they too were part of this new beginning. As the sanctuary began to be prepared for departure, Lucas and Mara spent their final nights in the place where they had first met and first begun to understand each other. They walked through the gardens where Mara had taught Lucas about the plants. They sat on the platform where they had watched countless sunsets together. They stood in the great cavern where the ancient waters held memories of ages past. On their last night, Mara took Lucas to a place he had never been before, a hidden pool surrounded by crystals that sang when the wind touched them. She told him that this was the most sacred place in her sanctuary, where she came when she needed to feel most connected to the ancient magic of her world. She said that she was bringing him here to mark the transition they were about to undergo, to create a memory that would ground them to who they were before the larger universe tried to define and reshape them. They stood together at the edge of the sacred pool and looked at their reflections in the clear water. Lucas saw a human and an elf whose faces had become equally dear to him. He saw a bond that transcended biology and species and culture. He saw a future that was frightening and uncertain but filled with possibility and hope. Mara took his hand and told him that she loved him, not because he was human or because he had saved her from loneliness, but because of who he was as an individual being. She said that he had brought something into her life that centuries of living in her sanctuary had not provided. She said that he had given her a reason to believe that change was possible and that the future could be better than the past. Lucas kissed her and told her that he loved her too, and that he would spend whatever time he had left in this universe doing everything he could to honor the gift that she had given him by accepting his declaration and choosing to build this life with him. The next morning, they departed the sanctuary with all three dragons flying overhead. Behind them, the place where Mara had lived for centuries began to fall into stillness and silence. Ahead of them lay a universe that was not prepared for what they represented but would have to learn to understand. The story of Lucas and Mara and the three dragons spread quickly across human Federation space and through elven territories. Some people celebrated their bond as a symbol of hope. Some people opposed it as a threat to their way of life. But slowly, very slowly, the universe began to change. Trade increased between human and elven territories. Joint research initiatives were established. Young people from both species began to travel to each other's worlds out of curiosity and fascination. And at the center of all of this transformation were Lucas and Mara, and Zephyr and Ember and Storm, living proof that two completely different beings could find love and meaning together. Their relationship had begun as an accident, a crashed ship and a chance encounter in the wilderness.